Out of all the films produced by Sanrio, Ovid's Metamorphoses is the most perplexing. Sanrio CEO Shintaro Tsuji dreamed of creating a film to rival Fantasia, a feature-length art piece uniting animation and music to showcase the pinnacle of both mediums. So when upstart Takashi Masanuga came to him with the concept to tell 5 classical myths through animation, Tsuji threw the funding of Sanrio behind the project. Takashi would write, direct, and produce the animation as a piece directed towards an international market. The film would be an adaptation of Ovid's Metamorphoses, specifically a handful of its most notable stories: Orpheus and Eurydice, Perseus and Medusa, the greatest hits. You can't help but get an impression that Takashi's favorite section of Fantasia was the Pastoral Symphony. No, not that part. Please, nope, censor that. Takashi's take would hopefully be less racist. The music was pivotal to the film's success, and therefore a soundtrack was assembled ahead of the 3-year animation period. The Rolling Stones, Joan Baez, and the Pointer Sisters contributed brand new songs to play in sync with the animation. A film with no dialogue or narration, but instead stories told through animation and original rock and folk songs. This wasn't going to be classical pieces heard in Fantasia, it was going to be modern. It was going to be cool. A team of over 170 American and Japanese artists began their work as soon as production was done on The Mouse and His Child. The film received a theatrical American release in May of 1978, 4 years after Tsuji's establishment of Sanrio Animation, and 6 years before the release of Tsuji's next Fantasia-inspired project, Sirius. Or as it is known in the US, Sea Prince and the Fire Child. Get used to this man wanting to make Fantasia. He does it at least 3 times. Box Office Picture Guide, a 70s magazine featuring movie reviews, aka a paper version of Rotten Tomatoes for all you kids, called the film a brilliantly conceived, fully animated cornucopia of visual and oral delights, a worthy successor to the crown long held by Disney's groundbreaking Fantasia. But sadly, they were in the minority. The majority of audiences did not know the Greek myths, and were thoroughly confused without any form of narration to guide them through. This, combined with the fact that the main character was a chibi boy who played all the roles, had the audiences perplexed, thinking the stories were supposed to be one connected narrative where the main character just kept dying over and over.
Huh?
Fred Patton, a cartoon historian and artist working for Sanrio in the late 70s, was invited to a special screening for staff and their families. The screening was a special disaster, because in addition to the movie's other problems, the soundtrack was turned up to full volume. The orchestral pop-rock music was so deafening that it literally drove some of the audience out of the theater. It was rumored around the office that it was so loud the plaster was flaking from the ceiling, while Takashi was complaining, "Can't you turn it up any louder?" It was an utter disaster. Metamorphoses received a limited theatrical release in California and New York, mostly for news and industry insiders to preview the picture. Then, it completely disappeared. Patton recalls Sanrio ending screenings after the first few days of its release, and immediately trying to brainstorm ways to recoup their losses. This was a $6 million production, a little under $30 million when adjusted for inflation. That was supposed to kick off their $50 million, $250 million adjusted, American theatrical animation campaign. And it was off to an extremely rough start. This movie was supposed to revolutionize the American animation industry. Disney was currently suffering from the loss of Walt Disney and left a massive hole in the industry that Tsuji wanted to fill. But with Metamorphoses not reviewing well, Sanrio was going to have to pivot in order to break even. They brought in producer Walt DeFaria to rework the film, write a narration that would be read by Peter Ustinov, who they had just worked with on A Mouse and His Child, and tried to salvage what the company deemed a disaster. The entire soundtrack was scrapped. No longer would the original tracks by Mick Jagger and the Pointer Sisters play during the scenes. Instead, they brought in French disco maestro Alec R. Constandios to create a new upbeat score along with a couple of pieces by disco legend Patty Brooks. Her songs are pretty wonderful, by the way. Definitely the highlight of this version of the film. 1 year after initial test screenings, Sanrio officially re-released the Metamorphoses, now called The Winds of Change, in May 1979. This version of the film was cut from its original 89-minute runtime down to 82 minutes. The 5 vignettes had been rearranged, and most noticeably, the main character who was previously unnamed was now called Wonder Maker.
Meet our newborn hero, Master Wondermaker.
Ustinov provided narration and voices for every single character. It's definitely a choice.
Well, what's it worth to you? How about 5 gold Gablon keys?
Damn right I'm on fire! Whoops, nip slip.
His narration swings wildly from the epic world-building descriptions to Mystery Science Theater level riffs over the animation.
Whatever it is, it's taking a lot of flack from these fairies. It could become a bald eagle if this keeps up.
It's really bizarre.
You now have a pact with the devil, dearie, and I'm gonna seal it with a kiss. Come here.
The film opens with a Star Wars-style title scroll. You could really tell they were striving for originality. Ustinov narrates the creation of the Greek universe. There is a cool mixture of live action and animation showing the creation of the Earth as a wave of horses colliding with Titan. Wonder Maker is then created by a pair of titans wandering the desolate new world. You've probably noticed by now, but the transfer of this movie is horrendous. This is the best quality release that has ever come out, a rip of a Japanese DVD which has the edges of the screen cropped off and this strange Vaseline filter over it, making it look like the first season of RuPaul's Drag Race.
Would you like some tortillas? Keeps your tortillas nice and warm.
Are you going to use the tortillas on your outfit too?
No, I was going to take them back to my room, put some cheese in there, and iron them. Yeah.
Sanrio is ashamed of this movie, and it shows. We'll get more into that later, but let's check out some of those myths. The first story is a retelling of Actaeon the Hunter.
Now, if we know Actaeon, this hare is a prime candidate for rabbit stew.
The animation becomes more traditional, but still has a surreal unease to it as the backgrounds don't always sync up with the characters overlaying them. I'm not sure if this was entirely intentional. Actaeon was a famous hunter who traveled with his hounds, finding and killing all that stood in his way. His battle with the bull is supposed to exemplify this, but between Wonder Maker's chibi design and Ustinov's non-stop riffing, it's really hard to take any of this seriously.
It's a wild boar, a crashing boar.
It gives more goofy gymnastics than it does epic myth. Actaeon finds a fairy fountain and Diana, the goddess of the hunt, bathing.
It would be hard to tell from this aspect that you are looking at a genuine goddess. But that's just what she is, Diana, the goddess of the hunt.
She spots the creepy hunter trying to get a free peep show and sicks her entire forest on him. The narration in this section is especially bad, like some of these riffs are just unhinged.
Hell hath no fury like a goddess who's been peeked at. Birds of a feather, flock together! You invaded my privacy! I am in a fury and I am getting madder by the minute!
She splashes him with water, turning him into a deer. He is then killed by his own hounds. It's a jarring way to start your movie, to say the least. The moral of the story is sound enough, but the execution makes it extremely hard to take seriously. This is going to be a recurring problem. The next story is of Orpheus and Eurydice, which is pretty well known. Hades sends a serpent to kill Eurydice, and there is an awesome snake transformation as it is literally consuming her instead of the typical little snake bite. Orpheus doesn't seem really upset by all this, and he decides to go to the underworld to get her back. The music as he descends into Hades is so weird. It's called Wandering Star Child.
Wandering star child, star child, star child, wandering star child.
And he stumbles on scenarios like dead children in purgatory, a two-headed version of Cerberus, and a Hansel and Gretel style room full of sweets, seemingly to tempt him into stopping his quest.
Why, hell can't be such a bad place after all.
Some of this imagery is just bananas. Orpheus plays his song and sways Hades into giving Eurydice a second chance. The issue is that as soon as they get to the stairs, he immediately turns around, which is just buck wild compared to most versions of the story. He didn't think at all. I can't help but wonder if this section was one of the areas where they cut footage, because this makes no sense and it makes him seem really dense. The third story is The Horse of Envy, where Wondermaker plays Hermes, a god who falls in love with Sabrina Carpenter. Sabrina's sister Agloro steals an offering from Athena, so Athena decides to curse her by sending envy after her ass.
Envy is in your heart now, and believe me, it's a lot worse than heartburn.
Agloro becomes jealous of her sister, tries to seduce Hermes in order to stop him from confessing to Sabrina Carpenter, and he uses his magic wand to turn her into stone, drained of her humanity. It's probably my favorite of the shorts because the imagery for Envy is so detailed and grotesque in comparison to the rest of the characters. Speaking of which, this film has some wild changes in animation style. The super deformed boy and girl who play the leads in various stories are directly juxtaposed against gods and monsters who are all highly stylized, varying from ethereal smoke beings to fully detailed nude models and even horrific monstrosities. The animation is clearly impressive, it's just a shame you can't see any of it. The fourth story is of Perseus and Medusa. Through his kind acts, he receives blessings from Hermes and Athena. Then he's a complete dick and steals the eye from the Fates in order to blackmail them into finding out Medusa's location.
You can't blame them for being upset. How would you feel if you had 5 missing eyes and a boy came along and snatched the only one you had left?
Medusa's design is really awesome. She has these wings like a bat and large pendulous titties. She doesn't last long though. The final story is of Phaethon, son of Apollo. He steals his dad's chariot and goes on a joyride. The song that plays when the steeds go wild is an absolute banger.
Got a hot shot of trouble inside me. Ain't got no time to panic or pray. It's like it's all love. Gotta find me, drive me, burn me away.
As he burns up, turning into a shooting star. It's a sudden ending that leaves you more perplexed than anything else. I'd say it left you wanting more, but the film is a bit of a ponderous bore.
The starring roles of Perseus, of Actaeon, and Orpheus, and Mercury. But now, he's a falling star. Not a bad way to go.
That felt like it was dragging on despite the number of stories they had packed into its standard runtime. Some of the backgrounds were by Yukio Abe, who would go on to be an art designer for Sanrio and work on many of their features, and Ron Diaz, who would go on to work for Don Bluth on Dragon Slayer and The Secret of Nim. These backgrounds are drop-dead gorgeous. Hell, all the concept art, promotional material, and assets released are amazing. But you never be able to tell if you actually watched the film because it was so poorly preserved that you can barely make out what you're looking at. Overall, it's a very strange film with an impressive pedigree and concept. It's very disappointing that this was the version of the movie we got. So you may be wondering, what happened to the original cut and all the original music made for the film? It's lost. It's all lost media. The only people who ever saw that cut of the film or heard the original soundtrack were the individuals who attended screenings in 1978, after which Sanrio took all copies of the movie and sealed them away forever. They might have even destroyed them, we do not know. It could be in a vault somewhere at Sanrio headquarters, it could be chilling out in a film archive somewhere in Hollywood. We have no idea. Sanrio has ignored the film to the point where it feels as though they wish they could deny its existence, much like Disney denies the existence of that scene from Fantasia. Oh god, why did I bring that up again? Pivot away, pivot away. The failure of their first blockbuster international feature was too much for the company to handle, and to save face, they have buried it away from prying eyes. But you can't help but wonder what the original version of the film would have been like. A version without Ustinov cracking outdated dad jokes every few minutes.
Observe that our hero is a gentleman. He could have zoomed in through the bedroom window, but he chose the front door.
A version with an original score and music by famous artists. Would it have evolved into a cult hit like Heavy Metal or one of Bakshi's numerous transgressive classics? We will never know. Takashi Masunaga was seemingly let go from Sanrio Film and went to direct multiple of those straight-to-VHS rip-off Disney movies. You might remember some of them from your childhood. You could probably do a whole video on just his weird Disney knockoffs. He never got another chance to take a big swing like the Metamorphoses, and Sanrio's founder Tsuji quickly moved on to his own pet project, an illustrated novella titled The Legend of Sirius, a book he intended to turn into a theatrical sensation akin to Fantasia. It's okay this time, he's got a plot line. Just kidding, it's Romeo and Juliet with fairies. There was no stopping the man determined to bring a smile to the world.
You now have a pact with the devil, dearie, and I'm gonna seal it with a kiss. Come here.